Hi everyone, my name is Carly and I am a mixed media artist who specializes in gouache paint, ink work, and sometimes I do digital painting. In today's video, I'll be showing you how I begin the underpainting for this bat painting I'm going to be making, including how I transfer the sketch and just build up the first few layers of gouache paint. So the first thing I did was I got this tracing paper, right? And what I normally do is I first make my sketch in Procreate, and that's just because I erase a lot and I just prefer to sketch digitally. So I have to transfer that onto my final surface that I'm going to be painting on, which is illustration board. And I really don't want to be erasing and making a whole mess, okay? I want a clean surface area with very light traced lines for me to begin my painting. So what I do here is I trace my sketch. I know, controversial. I trace my sketch from Procreate by using tracing paper. After I have my trace of my sketch that I drew, I taped that over my illustration board so it doesn't move, but I keep it pretty loose so that I can slip some graphite paper underneath. Basically what graphite paper does is when you draw on graphite paper, it imprints a clean line of graphite anywhere you draw, and it creates just the perfect clean outline for your drawing. It just makes everything so much easier. I love it. So basically I have my sketch over the graphite paper, and I'm using red ink so that it's easier for me to identify areas I've already traced over, and that way I don't accidentally go over the same area twice, and it just creates this super clean outline. It's just the perfect starting point. Okay, so once I'm done with just the trace, I then go on and I use watercolor pencils to begin the underpainting. You can use regular watercolor. You could even use really diluted gouache paint. I like using watercolor pencils because I feel like I have a lot more control over where the color is, and smaller areas I want saturated more. So basically, I view this as a way to draw the shadows underneath. Normally in my other videos, you will see me using a lot of blues to create shadows, but I want this piece to be a lot more warm. And purple, obviously, what makes purple? Red and blue. So basically, if you use purple, it'll just add more of like a warm sunset-y feel. If you look at golden hour, you will see a lot of purples and orangey yellows, and I want more of that effect. So I'm using a purple watercolor pencil and just drawing everywhere I want there to be shadows. And I'm just doing this like you would if you were to draw with graphite. Like, I'm lightly shading in areas where I want less purple, yada yada. I don't feel the need to get super detailed with it, only because you're going to be layering over this, and those are going to go away anyway. But basically, this is just a good map and guide for me when you begin to build the layers of gouache paint. I'm also using a warmer toned brown, like an orange brown, for the midtones that are going to be around the shadows. Because the bat is going to be a very warm toned black bat, I'm using a lot of yellowy browns and a lot of purples to create those undertones underneath. And the thing with gouache is when you layer with gouache, the more wet it is, the more it's going to mix with whatever's underneath. I like to use the underpainting as like a guide of where the undertones are going to go. I find that works best with gouache paint, and it just creates this really beautiful effect where when you add other layers of gouache paint on top, you can see the purple in between the transition shades where the midtones meet the shadows. It just creates a very beautiful effect. Once I have those established, I go in with a smaller paintbrush. I use a lot of small paintbrushes because, as you can see, I'm doing a smaller painting. This is an 8 by 10 inch illustration board, so generally am going to be using a lot of smaller brushes. I just have this smaller paintbrush and I'm going in and I'm adding water to them. I'm making sure not to do too much water. There's no need to add a ton of water. It's just going to make it all splotchy, but I'm just blending that all together. And I know. Does it look cute? No. This looks pretty ugly. I'm not gonna lie to you, the underpainting is like, it is a test of faith in yourself and your abilities. This looks like poo. I realize it. But it works. And I use this method for all of my paintings. The interesting thing about painting like this is it kind of feels like drawing. So I have this smaller brush. I have it, I wouldn't say damp. I would say it's a little bit more wet than damp, but you know, it's not dripping wet. And the way I'm blending all of these watercolor pencil colors together, it's similar to drawing. You know, you get one area and lightly shade, and you don't want to put too much pressure on those light shadows. However, the areas where there's, you know, more pigment, that's going to be the darkest darks. You want to put more pressure on. So it feels very similar to drawing, and I think that's why I also like this method. If I were oil painting, I would pre-mix a lot of colors, or, you know, have at least a basic amount of colors pre-mixed. And it's very much like you're looking at something and, okay, right here, it's going to have more of a green tone here versus right here, it's going to be more yellow, you know. It's very much like you are creating the colors and then putting it on, but with gouache paint, it feels more like layering, like you're drawing. And you're doing a lot more of the undertones first with the knowledge that later on it's going to be a different color. Basically, it just feels like drawing. It's just more wet. So I hope that if you're scared of painting specifically with gouache paint, try and look at it like that. Specifically when you get to an ugly stage like this is what I would consider an uglier stage. It doesn't feel very gratifying, but I have that knowledge that these colors are the foundation for the value and undertones for the painting later on, because this bat is going to be a lot darker. It's going to be closer to black, but I know that these colors blended in underneath that is going to add so much more richness than if I were to be like, oh, it's a black bat, so I'm going to use a lot of black immediately. No, and I also think that this method helps me with my extra brain that really likes to go a little too far with some things. It really helps me to hold back and be like, do I really need this much black in this area? Like, do I really need, or am I just thinking I need that? It really helps me to observe more. I hope that makes sense, and that this helps you with, maybe you're hitting the puberty stage of a painting and you're like, this looks like crap. What am I doing? I really hope that this gives you the confidence to know that later on it's going to look good, because this is setting the painting up for a lot more vivid richness in the colors and values later on. So once I have the basic undertones all blended in, now I have a good map. Now I have a map that's like, okay, everywhere there's purple is going to be more of a shadow. Everywhere that's more of a light brown, there's going to be more light hitting that, and not as much of a cool toned shadow. Now I can go in and add black or dark brown, and I'm going to layer that and mix that in with those undertones. And now it's going to actually start looking like a painting. Now it's kind of like, almost like, have you ever seen, this is completely different, a different method that I know a lot of old masters used, and actually some concept artists use now, is a grayscale painting where you just have the value and then they add in the colors after. I'm kind of doing that, except the opposite. Like I said, the colors underneath add a much more vivid richness to the values I'm adding in after. So right now, I'm literally going in with black, just black. And I'm blending that into the darkest darks first so that I don't overdo it. because like I said, I'm extra. I like to start with the darkest darks after I'm done with the basic watercolor pencil underpainting, and I'm blending that out, and the way I'm blending it out still very much feels like I'm drawing, but it's just more wet. I have a damp brush and I'm smoothing out those gradients. I'm placing the black where it's going to be the darkest dark, and I'm blending that out towards the gradients I've already established. And as you can see, what happens is it mixes with those undertones I've already established. Whereas if I was oil painting, I'm not saying you can't use this method with oil painting. What I am saying is that it makes sense with gouache to do this method because of the nature of the medium. If I were oil painting, which I love oil painting, by the way, I'm not dissing on oil painting. Oil painting, it's a different thing, and it's gorgeous and beautiful, and I love it. I do prefer gouache. But if I were to oil paint, how I would approach it is I would more likely have a bunch of colors already pre-mixed. So I'd have different variations of blacks and browns mixed with purple in some areas. But with gouache, it's like you don't need to do that because you make those colors as you layer. And don't get me wrong, I think it's very important to have the technique and skill and learn the ability to see life and to color pick with your eyes and to create colors accurately. I think that's very important no matter what medium you're using. And you still need to have knowledge of, color picking, creating colors that are accurate. However, the process on like how you get to that point, it's different. I think I see a lot of people who tend to paint like they would with oils, and they switch to gouache, and it's very difficult because they're like, why is the colors changing on me, and I don't like that. That's kind of the whole medium, and that's how I like to paint. I like to mix as I go. And if you like that, then I think you'll really like gouache. So as you can see, I am layering on the black, and it's creating a lot more dimension as it mixes with the underpainting. It just really sets the tone for the whole piece, especially with things that you're painting that might not seem like there's a lot of vivid color. This is a great way to add a lot more vivid, beautiful transition colors in a subtle way and just add a lot more richness to your painting, especially if you're using gouache paint. Anyways, I hope this was helpful, and I can do a whole video on, learning how to color pick, how to create more accurate colors. My God, there's a whole can of worms. There's like 10 videos I can make. Anyways, I hope this was helpful, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and I will be here next week. Bye!